Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WinUI Community Call January edition. For those that don't know me, my name is Anna. I'm a PM on the WinUI team, and I host these calls every month. So thank you all for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and get into the PowerPoint here. So a little bit more about the community call. These take place usually on the third Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific. The next call is scheduled for February 17th, but we will let you all know if there are schedule changes or anything like that. But that's the next slot we have. We are always available on GitHub and Twitter. GitHub for feature requests, bug filing, things like that. And then Twitter for any questions. GitHub can be used for that as well. These are both just really good channels of communication to get in touch with our team. So today we have a really exciting call. We are welcoming Niels, who is a member of our awesome Windows developer community, and he is going to be talking about Fluent design, which I know a lot of people are interested in, and it's something we haven't really touched on yet in these community calls, so very excited for that. Then we have an update on WPF, which I know a lot of you are waiting for and are hoping to hear about. And then we also have schedule updates for WinUI 3, which is another thing that I know a lot of people have been asking about and are curious about. So it's going to be a good call. And we will have Q&A at the end, as always. So what is WinUI? It is the native UI platform for Windows 10. So WinUI is built for modern hardware and devices, and it offers the latest Fluent styling, which you will hear a lot more about in a bit. So you can use WinUI to build rich .NET and C++ apps for Windows 10 devices. And WinUI actually powers the Windows and Xbox OS shells and a lot of apps, as well as other platforms like React Native for Windows and Xamarin Forms. So WinUI has two generations. WinUI 2 is the second generation of this native UX stack in Windows, and it is built for UWP apps. So WinUI 2 consists of the visual layer and the XAML framework in the operating system, and also a library of Fluent-based controls and styles that get updated trimesterly. So WinUI 3 is a new third generation of this native UX stack in Windows, and it's currently in preview. The last time we released a preview, it was preview 3. But WinUI 3 consolidates the UX technologies previously built into Windows into a single decoupled framework, and it's made available for every type of Windows app. UWP, Win32 desktop, WinUI 3 will work for your app. All right, let's just get right into business here. Niels is our community spotlight kind of member of the month here. He's a UX designer at Royal Philips NV working on next generation healthcare experiences. He is also a Microsoft Windows Development MVP and a UWP developer. So Niels, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can get started.
All right. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Great. Cool. Welcome, everybody. My name is Niels Laute. I'm, as Anna mentioned, a UX designer, but also doing a lot of Windows development. So I work at Philips, where we do a lot of healthcare software and also hardware. And there we're really using a lot of Microsoft or WPF technologies, also some WinUI. And in my role there, I do a lot of, let's say, ad hoc prototyping. But as more of a passion project, I do a lot of Fluent design concepts and blog posts around these as well. So you might have seen some of my stuff floating around on some websites and some of my blog posts where I really try to explore how we can leverage WinUI and UWP, but also the Windows Community Toolkit, and to make it very easy to, let's say, create these very compelling interfaces. Which UWP and WinUI actually has is a great platform to do that. Today I'll be talking about one of the other passion projects that I have, which is called Power Toys. You probably are familiar with it. If not, it's a Microsoft project that basically provides a set of utilities for power users for the Windows 10 platform, and it does a lot of these onboard utilities that really enhance your the experience that you have with Windows. On the right, you see a couple of modules, and basically what I want to discuss today is show you how we've been using Fluent design to basically improve the UX of some of these modules. So I think about a year ago we started with an issue that we had on the repo that actually asked for a visual update to the icon. The one on the left was the icon that was actually implemented, and we thought that it would be nice to really have a more fluent interpretation of that icon. That actually led to some updated iconography that you see here on the bottom as well for some of the other modules. And it really kickstarted I think a lot of requests to basically modernize some of the UI elements that you see in the various PowerToys applications. So one of the first steps that we took was actually moving PowerToys from React to XAML Islands. So what you see here on the left was the first implementation using some, I think it was React or some web technologies. And as you can see, it felt like the Windows 10 settings settings application, but it was just off, right? So some margins, some paddings, some controls just rendered differently. And with the switch to XAML Islands, it was actually a very nice opportunity to really stretch that as well and to really make it feel very native. So what we've been doing is actually spending a lot of attention and also effort in really tweaking all of those settings to feel as native as possible. And obviously, the design guidelines that Microsoft hosts on the Docs platform really helps to basically structure all of these layouts in such a way that really the most important information is important as possible. Some other modules that we've been working on, I will basically walk you through those to see how we've adopted Fluent and how we took some of those core principles in there as well. So where you see, this is a utility called Run. It basically is a replacement for the Run function that is part of Windows, and it allows you to quickly launch applications. And there's a lot of plugins to do easy calculations. What you see here on the left was basically the spec, and obviously a spec is not per se meant as a final implementation of it, but it was actually, when we started the work, a very nice opportunity to explore how we can leverage Fluent. So what you see here on the right is that we took a lot of effort in how should we render some of the shadows, because this is a UI application that basically will launch on top. So using shadows to put in the contract was quite important as well. We also adopted some of these, let's say, command bar-like buttons to really give that UWP or fluent experience. Something else that we're currently working on and that will hopefully ship in this release or the next one is a redesign of the Fancy Zones editor. So Fancy Zones is a window management application that allows you to create these zones where, as a replacement of Windows Snap, where you can more easily lay out the multiple applications or windows that you have. So what you see here on the left is probably, if you've been using PowerToys or Fancy Zones already, is what you currently see, and you see that there's a lot of, let's say, missing some visual hierarchy. So you can see at the bottom, it allows you to select some of the monitors and then the layouts in the button with a lot of settings around it. And we actually spend a lot of time and different iterations on basically making that experience a bit more, let's say, fresh and also provide that hierarchy. So what you see on the right is the current implementation that we have. And as you can see, is that we basically moved some of these settings to different dialogues. We also made the creation of new layouts a bit more straightforward. So before, you basically had to clone a current layout. Now we have this very nice create new layout button that does exactly that. And it will then allow you to basically select between a grid or a canvas-based layout. Same for some of the tweaking on the settings. It will be very easy for people to select a specific layout and then tweak some of the settings, or it will take you to the actual zone editor where you can really play around with how all of these zones should be displayed. What's maybe good to mention is that this application was starting off from a WPF code base. And as you can see, is that we're adopting a lot of the UWP or the WinUI styling. So maybe that's good to quickly show. We've been using a modern WPF, which is a UI library, completely open source and built by the community to actually bring some of these visual styles to WPF as well. And it actually has some controls that are part of WinUI backported. So stuff like content dialogues and some of the web grid stuff was actually backported to WPF. So it's very easy to basically use the same WinUI thinking and then apply it with WinUI. And it also comes with actual theming support as well. So if you would change your Windows theming settings, it will adopt dark mode as well. So that's pretty cool and something I would like to highlight there. Another application that you see here on the left was the previous implementation of Image Resizer. Image Resizer was an existing WPF application, already open sourced, was adopted by PowerToys. What you see here on the right is a first step of the redesign. You can see is that we're adopting WinUI styling there as well. And also making things a bit more, we add some spacing, we add some white space as well to really provide a bit more, let's say, hierarchy. But maybe what's good to show is that we're working on some concepts of what this could look like if we would adopt WinUI at some point. So here you see a bit of a bigger redesign where we really want to focus also on the preview experience. So if I'm going to resize my pictures, can I then basically get some preview here on the left as well? And as you can see, it uses all of the modern styling and makes it a bit more easier to switch between different templates or to create new templates. So this is a UWP version of it. You can find it somewhere in the PowerToys repo. It's all open source. So if you want to play around with some of the visual styling, then just take that. And I'm also open to PR. So if you have very good feedback. Maybe another thing to highlight is that since a couple of months, we have a new utility called Color Picker, which is a really nice way of picking colors and then extracting the color formats for that. So what you see here on the right is the current implementation of it. It also adopts Fluent design, as you can see. And we also, so Martin Gran worked on this as well. And he took a lot of effort into providing these very polished animations, as you can see. So if you copy something to clipboard, you have a very fluent animation that comes up. The same if you want to tweak the color, as you can see, it really opens up and it really shows how animations can really help you to have that model. What you see here on the left is actually something that hopefully the work will start soon on, which is the UBI experience, so the out-of-box experience for PowerToys. And there's maybe something to highlight that obviously a design system is not only just what you see on the screen, but also the general experience that your users will have. And providing a very solid out-of-the-box experience that actually shows you all the different modules or applications that we have. And with this thing will be a video or an animation that will actually show you how these utilities will work. And hopefully we will see that users will be more accustomed with all the different modules that PowerToys provide. This will be hopefully a XAML Island implementation as well. So we have a working UWP version that we will then leverage XAML Island to actually provide that experience for new users. Maybe to showcase some other concept that we've been thinking about as well is to make PowerToys more accessible with mouse and keyboard. So now it requires a lot of, let's say, keyboard shortcuts to launch some of the different applications. So we're now exploring how maybe a system tray flyout could actually provide us some of these modules. So what you see here is at the bottom is let's say a quick launch pad where we have the different modules to easily start. But also provide you some more detailed settings of some of the applications. So if you want to switch Fancy Zones layout, you could actually very easily do that right from out the sys tray. So that's quite nice. So hopefully we can in a future version of PowerToys provide this experience as well. Maybe to wrap up my story. Some quick tips that will always be helpful, I guess, is the design guidelines for Fluent are actually quite extensive and well structured. So make sure to really follow those if you want to create very nicely native applications and to really make it feel very native. The same, of course, for the WinUI controls gallery and the WinUI controls set. It provides you a lot of, let's say, building blocks that will make your UI, if implemented correctly with these guidelines, in a very compelling experience. One thing that I really want to stress is that really invest some time to polish your UI and UX. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. Sometimes if you just be inspired of what you see elsewhere, or using tools like the community toolkit, there's a lot of these animation helpers that without I think with 1 or 2 lines of code, you can actually create these very compelling animations that will really make your UI stand out. And as you can often see on social media, users will really love that. And maybe the last point that I want to make is that make sure to be inspired by the community. There are a lot of great people online on Twitter and Reddit and in the various repos that provide a lot of super cool concepts that can be of inspiration of the implementations that you do yourself. So I want to highlight 2 of them. So Z does a lot of these redesigns of inbox applications. And it actually helped me a lot to look at those and to get inspiration of how he lays out certain UIs or certain controls. And Martin does a lot of work in the various Microsoft repositories related to XAML and UI libraries, where he does a lot of specking and a lot of let's say examples of how certain applications could look like, or how certain UI elements could be implemented. So yeah, that wraps up my my story.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Niels. I mean, it's so great to see Windows native apps looking so beautiful. Um, and yeah, I think the work you're doing on Power Toys is really cool. Just a quick plug for Power Toys. For those of you who haven't tried it out, my favorite thing is the color picker. It's life-changing. I love it. It's awesome. And it's really cool to see it's getting a redesign. Okay, next up, we actually have our WPF update. Pramalini, who is the PM from our team who works on WPF, is unfortunately not able to join us today, but she's recorded a couple slides. So I'm just going to go ahead and play those. Hopefully, everything goes smooth and you guys will be able to hear them.
Good morning, everyone. I am Pramalini David, a program manager on the WPF team. And today, I'm excited to be sharing updates on our WPF investments. First on our list is WPF ARM64 support. We have been heads down on this work for the past 2 to 3 months, and today I'm excited to announce that WPF ARM64 support will be arriving in the next few weeks. The official announcement will be made on GitHub, and it will tell you how to try out the preview builds, as well as how to build and test WPF ARM64 apps. We look forward to you validating these builds and giving us feedback. The next item on the list is our accessibility updates. We are investing heavily in improving the accessibility of controls and properties in WPF. One example is that we're improving the screen reading capability of our tooltips. That is just one example in a very long list of investments that we're making. The complete list of these investments will be published on GitHub, and the timeline for availability of these updates is the end of the first quarter. The last item that I want to share with you about is our test infrastructure work. We are actively working on scaling our test infrastructure and open sourcing it. The main goal here is to enable you, our community, to submit and merge PRs into the platform yourself. To that end, please do continue to submit your issues and PRs on the repo. We merged about 18 PRs from mid-December to mid-Jan. I fully expect to merge more PRs per month, especially since we are starting to onboard our newest dev recruits in a couple of weeks. That brings me to the end of this month's update. I most certainly look forward to speaking to you next month with more updates on our WPF investments. Thank you.
Oops. Okay, perfect. So that was the WPF update. I'm not sure if Pramalini is going to be joining us for Q&A, but I would just go ahead and leave your questions. Either we'll get to them next time or we'll follow up with them on GitHub. So now it is Ryan's turn to go up. Ryan, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Can you hear me, Anna?
Yep.
And can you see me?
Yes, you're all good to go.
Awesome. Excellent. So, hello everyone who's listening in on the call. I know that there are lots of questions about the timelines for WinUI 3. We've been saying we want to ship in first half of 2021, and we've been kind of sort of intentionally vague on that since I didn't want to hand out any poor dates. But good news, the wait is over. I'm going to share some more detail about that. I'm also happy to answer questions in the Q&A section on this. So if there's anything you want to know that sort of goes beyond what's prepared here, then please do ask, and I'll be happy to field those questions. So let's jump in. I've prepared what I'm calling sort of the 2021 WinUI 3 schedule. I also want to talk a little bit about evolving the way we ship as well, and this will become clear in just a second. So just for those who aren't completely familiar with how we've gotten to where we are, we've shipped actually 5 pre-releases of WinUI 3 now, 2 alphas and 3 previews. Just going back to build of last year, that's when we introduced Preview 1. We sort of left that alpha stage, went into previews. Preview 1 introduced desktop or Win32 support. We turned around a couple months later and shipped Preview 2, which was basically a stability release that really just built upon Preview 1, did a whole bunch of bug fixing, and got things a little bit more stable. And then our most recent preview was Preview 3, and I mentioned this toward the start of the call. We released this on, I think it was November 17th of last year. And, it brought all the features from the previous previews forward. About 65 controls are in there, but it also made progress on a number of other features that we focused on for that preview, including adding ARM64 support and a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of VS tooling improvements that were really needed. And that's kind of where we sit right now. And so let's talk about what is coming. So it's like mid to end January right now. And the next thing that will be coming is something called Reunion 0.5. So we've been talking about WinUI 3 as sort of the tip of the spear of Project Reunion. You might have heard of Project Reunion. It's really sort of an effort to unify a lot of the disparity that has evolved over time between Win32 and UWP. And Reunion is a set of libraries that you'll be able to go and add to your application that helps smooth over that and brings all the advantages really of both of those app models into one. And in Reunion 0.5, we'll have a version of WinUI 3, and that whole package together, Reunion 0.5 and WinUI 3, will be a supported release. So this will be our first supported release. Previews are not supported. We recommend explicitly against trying to ship any production software on those releases. So please don't try and do that on Preview 3, even though it's out. But that will change with Reunion 0.5, and we will have our first supported version of WinUI 3 included in that release. And this is a good time just to sort of briefly chat about the how we need to sort of change how we ship. So let's take a look at how we ship today. With a typical WinUI 3 preview, what you're really getting with that is a whole bunch of features that are really sort of in a mixed state of stability. You have some features that are what you might call preview features. They, maybe their APIs aren't stable. Maybe the APIs are stable, but there's really big bugs in them that need to sort of get worked out. And then you have stable features. And those features, like often controls, are in a relatively stable state. They're not they weren't difficult to say port from like the WinUI 2 controls library into WinUI 3. There's not a whole lot of bugs there. And it's, generally fine for our previews to have this, wide mixture of different stability in the features because, as I mentioned earlier, previews are not really supported releases. They're just sort of a preview, and we don't expect people building production software on it. However, when we want to do supported releases, it's really important that developers have trust in all of the features that are within a supported release. If you're using, the version of WinUI 3 that will be in Reunion 0.5 in March of 2021, you really don't want to be hitting an angle bracket in the markup editor in VS and seeing a giant list of controls, like let's say the navigation view, for example, and if you start typing out navigation view in there, you don't want to be guessing whether or not navigation view is in a previous state or in a stable state. You don't want to have to refer to documentation to figure that out either, since a lot of people just don't read documentation anyway. And so as a result, it's important for us to be able to pull these stable features out when we do supported releases. And this really gets to how we need to evolve our shipping. Basically, we need to move from a single sort of preview release, like what we've been doing with WinUI 3, into something that is basically a dual release when we release, where we have supported releases, but we still want to have that preview capability where we can introduce new features and have unstable features for you to try out. And this, if it looks familiar, it might be because maybe you've used WinUI 2. This is exactly how WinUI 2 ships. So WinUI 2 has sort of stable supported releases that it does roughly 3 times a year. And then it has monthly WinUI 2 previews that are put out. And we want to basically get WinUI 3 onto a similar track. The time frame for when we'll get it on this track is a little hazy. Ideally, it would be for March when we do that first supported release. March is not very far away, and so it would be a pretty heavy sprint to split these out by March. But we're having internal discussions to see if we can do that. If it doesn't happen for March, we'll still ship a version of WinUI 3 that has stable and supported features, and then maybe we'll bifurcate into this dual shipping mode sometime after March. But we'll see where we get there. But the most important thing is that in March, that's when you'll get your first version of WinUI 3 that you can really start building production software on. Then after March, not long after March, we want to release an update. We're going to ship Reunion 0.8. This will include an update to WinUI 3 with various fixes in the to the WinUI 3 features that we find between March and May. It'll also have some new preview features, which I've sort of added to the animation at the bottom there. But you can also imagine that in that period of time, we might have a couple of preview features that have reached a level of maturity where now we can kind of consider or call them stable features. And so those stable features would then be elevated up into the supported release. And now you've got even more capability that you can rely on for your production apps. And then after May, we're going to start getting more toward that trimesterly sort of schedule, and we'll release Reunion 1.0. The numbering here, you're probably curious about, like, why are we going with 0.5, 0.8, 1.0? I would say there's still some debate in the numbering internally as to what we do, but the idea of a 0.5 and a 0.8 is to signify that it still won't have all the features that we'd really like these products to have. And so 1.0 is, it's more of a signal of like readiness than anything, not a symbol of maturity. You can bet on 0.5 and 0.8. They'll be stable, good supported releases. Our product support teams will be in place for those. But we think that there's enough sort of critical mass of Reunion 1.0 that there's that will be coming in October. That it like warrants sort of like a major version bump to call it a 1.0. Anyway, there will be an update to WinUI 3 in October 2021, and it's just going to be exactly like you saw before. Bug fixes, probably some additional preview features in that period of time, some more of the preview features that we've introduced in previous releases will likely become stable, and then we'll move those into the sort of stable release that will be referenced by Project Reunion in the October timeframe. So I hope that gives some. I hope first of all that helps you to understand the timeline this year for how we do WinUI 3. We're going to be basically releasing it as a part of Project Reunion. When you make a WinUI 3 app, the sort of golden path that we'll recommend is make a Reunion app. So use Reunion 0.5, use Reunion 0.8, use Reunion 1. That will be like a sort of like a meta package that then points to the WinUI 3 one, and you'll ingest WinUI 3 through that mechanism and be able to make a WinUI 3 app that way.
All right, great. Thanks so much for going over that, Ryan. Yeah, to everybody in the audience, I hope that that answered some of your questions and kind of clarified everything for you. So now I think we're just gonna go right along to the Q&A. Savoy, if you are ready.
Hi, Anna. I think I'm coming through.
Yep. And I'm putting us in together mode right now. Let's see. Cool. I think we have everybody. And I figured out how to put myself in this time too. Okay.
Exciting. All right, let me throw it to together mode as well so I can see everyone. All right, I see Chigusa, Ryan, and Niels. If anyone else is joining us, please feel welcome to turn your camera on now. So, I'll start with the question for Niels. Niels, great presentation, by the way. Absolutely loved it. We're wondering, what are you most excited about in terms of Fluent with WinUI?
I think what's quite exciting is in the previous weeks we've seen a lot of proposals by the WinUI team in the repository addressing some of the let's say visual representation of some of the controls. So it looks like that there will be quite some major redesigns of things like grid view and list view, adopting let's say branded corners and a lot of other issues that people previously had with the previous style. So that's quite nice. It's nice to see let's say a modern look and feel on those.
Awesome. All right. Question for Ryan. It seems like Windows Ink has been largely unchanged for a few years now. Is there any plan to bring some of the rich inking experience, like in Microsoft apps such as Whiteboard or OneNote, into WinUI?
The answer is yes to that, although I don't know if we'll bring those specific experiences in, but just to give a sort of an overview of Ink, there's basically, I think of Ink in WinUI sort of in two terms. One is, can you do really high performance sort of customized ink experiences, like if you were like an inking app that was built around that experience. We've done work in the Preview 3 timeframe and also beyond the Preview 3 timeframe to enable like high performance off-thread inking support. And so that inking support will enable those types of apps to go and make really great inking experiences. Then there's like UI controls that have ink built in. And we do plan, and like that shows in a few different spots. There's like ink canvas, which is like very obvious, but then there's less obvious spots, like our text controls, the ability to handwrite ink into them and things of that nature. And that sort of like control level inking support is definitely on the roadmap for us to add. I don't have a specific time frame for those. So like ink canvas is one of the few controls that isn't in WinUI 3 Preview 3 right now, and it might take some time for us to get it in just because we're focused on other things. But definitely having like premium inking controls is important. We felt that it was more urgent to enable the really high performance inking apps that are just totally blocked if they don't have the right threading support, and so that's what we've been focusing on.
Thanks, Ryan. That comes from Joseph Finney on GitHub, by the way. So let's see, where should we go next? Another question for Ryan. Ryan, how asks new team members introduced into WinUI info bar, navigation view, footer, menu items, etc., which are not yet available in WinUI Preview 3. When will they be ported? When can we switch to WinUI 3 as the default branch? I realize that second question wasn't as related to the first part I shared.
Yeah, that's
focus
fine.
On the second one or the first one.
That's fine. I think for a lot of the answers of when is like a specific set of features going to be in, we'll try and keep people updated on the roadmap. I saw Alvin mention in the YouTube chat that like, are we going to see an update to the roadmap based on this timeline that I just showed? And I think that that's an urgent thing that we need to do. So I don't remember the specific controls that you called out, but I would say let's follow the roadmap. It will try and outline when different features are coming. And you saw the releases. So the first time you'll be able to like write production apps and be able to rely on that in like a production capacity will be in March.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I'll grab a question for Steve here. Steve, if you happen to know, what's the status of, oh man, it's a YWSIWYG editor for XAML for WinUI 3 /C++. I believe this is referring to the XAML designer.
Yeah, the WYSIWYG. Can you all hear me?
Is that how you say
Good?
it? Yeah, you're coming
Yeah,
through.
WYSIWYG. Yeah. Stands for what you see is what you get. And I'm assuming that this is just the referring to the old UWP designer. I know some people kind of say, oh, WinForms is a true WYSIWYG editor or designer, and UWP never had it, but I'm assuming we're just talking about parity. That's going to come post 3.0. That's something we haven't quite worked out yet with the dependencies with Visual Studio. So it's definitely something on our radar as one of the things that we want to get to after 3.0. We just have a lot of other priorities right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. I'll throw a question to Anna. Anna, Eleanor is asking, is there a fix for the data grid crashing when scroll bars are needed? If so, will it be in the preview, the next preview, or will there be a new Windows Community Toolkit release that will have the fix?
Yeah, so this was an interesting bug. I don't think that it was a bug with DataGrid itself. It seemed to be some kind of like OS WinUI compatibility thing. But I actually just followed up on this bug the other day, and it sounded like at least our engineers weren't hitting it anymore. I wish I had like a more concrete answer for you. Maybe if you want to follow up, I assume you're still hitting the issue. Maybe if you want to follow up with like what OS build you're using, and what maybe exact version of WinUI you're using, that might be helpful. Because last I heard, this wasn't reproing for our engineers. Hope that's helpful.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Anna. I have a question for Chigusa. Two questions here that I'll pair together since they're related. Chigusa, Skull BRB is asking, are the Fluent system icons set on Figma planned to come to Windows soon? And the related question is, will there be an update to the newer Fluent icons for the Sego MDL2 asset font in Windows? Oh, and you're muted.
It was slow, so I unmuted and muted again. So I do believe that someone from the icon team has previously answered some questions like these on GitHub, that they are looking into feedback like this, how community is asking how those are related. So look out for additional information from them. We're also working to better the iconography documentation related to that, which we have a lot of comment from the community like yourself. So look out for any documentation update that we have that might tell you some of those answers.
Thanks, Chigusa. All right, I will throw another question to Ryan. Ryan, it's we probably knew the question was coming. How's asking, it's 2021 now, what's the progress of open source? And this is coming from GitHub.
Yep, great question. I've mentioned in past calls, I think, that open source sort of sits alongside a lot of the other things that we can prioritize, and bringing features online have been what we focused on our resources on more than open source. I think open source is going to be in the discussion in that sort of October timeframe. So to pull back the curtain a little bit about what's been planned versus what hasn't been, we largely have the features for both March and May sort of figured out. And in fact, our public roadmap shows the May feature list already, and we updated it based on what we think that will be shipping there. Beyond May, we have sort of a planning exercise that we have yet to do to sort of like determine exactly what we invest in that sort of May to October timeframe. There's a lot of things that will be competing for resources in that timeframe, but I think open source is one that definitely is an important thing for us to seriously consider doing in that time frame. So it's not open source, will be open source by October. That's definitely not a promise I'm making, but I think once we get the May update out, that might be a time where we can get back to working on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Mike, I have a question for you if you're able to share anything here. Vincent is saying it would be great if templates can be instantiated from C# as well, not just SAML. Asking for C# for markup for WinUI 3. That is a long open issue with WinUI 3. Will that be fixed in Reunion 0.5?
Trying to figure out that was two things there. The templates for C# and the C# markup. The second part, I think, was about C# markup.
I think it was the same, meant to be the same thing. That aside was in parentheses. So C# template, I think, is the focus here.
I think we talked about this a month ago. Steve, do you remember? Is this the project templates for C#? Not sure what this is about.
My understanding, this is sort of like you know how Maui has a new C# style way you can declare your UI?
Yeah, the C#. Okay, yeah, let's talk about the C# markup. Well, okay, well, we can at least talk about that because I think that's not just one that's been asked before. The Xamarin Forms has this C# markup, which lets you create your view from C# instead of from markup. And you can do the same thing in XAML because you can just use everything is available from C#. But the C# markup that Xamarin Forms has some additional features that make it even easier. And it's something that we've looked at. It's something that we've done some prototyping on. It's not something that we have in the pipeline right now, but it's definitely interesting, and we've done some prototyping on it. And I haven't looked at it deeply enough. I don't think we need to add any features to the runtime to enable it. I think it's something anybody could do on top of it right now.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. Chigusa, a new question for you. Tropical is saying, I've noticed some PRs in the Microsoft UI XAML repo, which makes significantly large changes to common controls such as buttons and sliders. What's the goal of these changes, and is there a roadmap?
Yeah, so if you have been following the Fluent talks in the past, I believe that you might have heard about design token and how we are aligning across the company, especially with the mobile and web and Windows. That's part of that work. So we're working together to try to take advantage of the design token, organizing and updating the visual so that we are in alignment. So that's the overall goal of those changes. The roadmap is different depending on the surface that you see those things happening, and I can comment on that, but look forward to changes. The next WinUI will have quite a bit of changes that you can expect.
Awesome. Steve, another question for you. Saint Forever is asking if you can tell us anything more about tooling. And specifically, they're saying, even happy to know if it's features that'll be shipping next year.
Kind of a vague, open-ended question. I could write a book probably about tooling. I can share a little bit. I won't go into details. I want to make sure I'm not promising anything. One of the things that we're currently investigating right now is removing the need to have the packaging project. For really large applications, we've found that it really significantly increases the build time. And so we're actively working on prototypes and trying to build momentum around removing that need. Still packaged, still MSIX. We're not talking about unpackaged apps, but working on just kind of a more familiar workflow where you can just F5 your app directly in Visual Studio. So that's, there's no timeline yet on when we'll have that, but that's sort of in the spirit of being honest and open. That's kind of, I think, one of the more exciting things we're looking at right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. A question for Mike or Ryan. I have both your names here. Matt Lacey is asking if WinUI 3 is going to work on Windows Insider builds before it goes GA or only once it goes GA.
Again, make a comment about that. There's the preview, the preview 3 that went on in November has an issue that only shows up on the insider preview builds, and so that we'll be able to address that next time we put out a release. Now, I don't know if that is the March release or if there'll be a preview before that.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Ryan, a question from Martin Anderson, who's asking, at the moment, the roadmap has a bunch of things listed as post 3.0. Will we be getting a roadmap updated with specific lists for 3.1 and 3.2, et cetera, and possible dates for when those releases will be aiming for? You may have covered this in your presentation earlier a bit.
I covered some of it, but I think it's a good question because not everyone tunes into the call and we need to have durable information. So I mentioned that we should update the roadmap. What I'm picturing, by the way, in my head when I talk about updating the roadmap is to take the roadmap that we have now, which is really like a 3.0 and a post 3.0, like you called out, and try and turn it into something that is more date driven. So to describe for March what features would be supported versus which ones would still be in a previous state. For May, same thing, which ones will be supported in a previous state. And then eventually, once October is planned out and we have that information, because I mentioned earlier we haven't completely planned October yet, where there's still like a planning sprint we need to go through there, then we would add that October column and do the same thing. What features will be introduced, what ones will be in a previous state, and what ones will be in a stable and supported state. So that's what I'm envisioning the roadmap becoming. We need to go and get that update done, but hopefully you'll have that information sooner rather than later, and then you'll be able to see how it'll unfold.
Awesome, thanks, Ryan. We're getting near the bottom of our new questions so far. I'll make call for questions again. We do have Clint from Power Toys and Niels with us, so if you have any questions for our guests, be sure to ask them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll wrap up our current questions and pull some in from last month. Ryan, Martin is asking if we have any updates yet on acrylic, or if we know how long after 3.0 will it be supported.
Acrylic is in that sort of same category of things we need to consider post-May. We know it won't be for May. So it'll be in that boat of like acrylic, open source, and a whole bunch of other, probably 200 other things that we'll have to consider doing for October. I do think that acrylic is relatively urgent to do. So it's probably about similar urgency to open source, and so like I wouldn't be surprised if it was in October, but once we know, we can confirm that.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Let's see. Pramalni isn't here, so you know what? I will pull some questions from last month while we wait to see a few more in chat. All right, so these ones are also mostly actually taken care of. We'll try. Man, I don't think we've ever hit the bottom of the list before.
Well,
this is unusual.
If there aren't any more questions, we can wrap early. But definitely, if you do have questions, drop them in the chat, so they'll definitely be answered.
We definitely finished earlier than I thought, so that's good that we were able to get through all these questions.
Yeah.
You know what? Here's a new one that just came through chat. Jörg is asking, will Reunion 0.5 support existing Preview 3 functionality, or will it be a subset of those features where we're just picking the stable features out of it? For developing, it's very important that I have a roadmap of the features.
Yeah, so I gave like a sorry, I want to actually go and read that question again because I gave sort of a partial answer, but like the 200 character limit on YouTube made it so that I couldn't give a proper answer. Yeah, so the answer to that question as to like whether or not there will be features sort of like pulled out in March or not will depend on whether or not we hit that double way of shipping where we have preview and stable releases. If we're able to do that for March, which I think would be very difficult for us to hit, but we'll explore it. Then what you would see is in Reunion 0.5, it would reference the stable version of WinUI 3, and there would be, and any preview features that are like of a preview quality just wouldn't be in that release, period. You would wouldn't be able to call those APIs. And then separately, there would be a preview release of WinUI 3 that does have those APIs and is not supported and has all of the same stuff that Preview 3 had, plus even more. If we don't quite get that far to separating those releases out, then what you'll likely see in Reunion 0.5 is a single WinUI 3 package that's a lot like the preview packages today. And it will have a mixture of stable and preview features, and there'll have to be some documentation that indicates which features are stable versus not. That's not a place where I want to end up, because then that makes things confusing in terms of like what can you rely on and what can't you rely on in Reunion 0.5. So I'd like to avoid that, but anyway, it sort of depends on if we can get to that place of splitting those two things out.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. We had a few more roll through here that we can use the last few minutes we have for. Jörg is asking now, and I'll pass this to Steve or Mike. Do we have any info on installers or packaging that should be used for first production-ready WinUI apps?
So I can take a stab at this a little bit. So obviously we'll support MSIX. If MSIX doesn't meet your needs, PowerToys is an example. Clint, I might put you on the spot a little bit. I know you're not using WinUI 3 yet, but there's this feature called dynamic dependencies, and there's a lot of good discussion on the Reunion repository about it that will allow your installer, your custom installer, to install the Reunion framework packages. So it's about as much as I know. So I think the answer is however you need to install your app, there will be the way to do that.
Yeah, in the near term, like March, I think we're just looking at the MSIX, which is the desktop application bridge, Centennial. Longer term, we have plans for any installer, MSI, but for the near term, just the desktop app installer, desktop application bridge.
Sure, Clint. Do you want to take a quick stab at explaining how you do that?
Yeah, so for PowerToys, I apologize if you can hear my 1-year-old in the background who's kind of mad. But PowerToys currently uses MSIX, namely Wix, under the hood. Our settings is currently a XAML island with WinUI 2x, and it's pretty straightforward to do that way. And then for when we get to WinUI 3, we're going to leverage the unpackaging support, and whatever is the appropriate way to handle that, we will do it. And if people think it's interesting, we'll do an entire blog series on how we transitioned from 2x to 3 and all the changes we needed to do.
Thanks, Clint. I do have a question for you now, but I can give you a minute to see if things calm a little bit over there.
It's not going to.
It won't? All right, I'll just ask you then.
It's nap time for him.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for being here to share today, Clint. We'd love to hear, are there any cool things to share coming up on the PowerToys roadmap?
The two big ones are, we call it Ubi. It's out-of-box experience, and it will be Ubi and Upgrade, where anytime a new user comes, we're going to try to create a good onboarding path for them to show them not just like the 1 or 2 PowerToys that they may be familiar with, namely like fancy zones, but talk about all the PowerToys, quickly how to get up and going with them. What we find is through like Twitter and other things that people are like, oh my gosh, what is this thing? And it's like shortcut guide comes up and they didn't realize it. Or they're like, hey, we really want a color pick. And we're like, it's been there in box for a couple releases now, my friends. But they're just not made aware of it. So we're aware of this onboarding and upgrade problem when we come out with new things. So we want to be sure that we're making people aware of new things, along with giving new users a great onboarding path for this. And we're hoping that this could be a good metaphor for other people as well to leverage. The next one, is Niels pointed out, is the big upgrade to the editor, which will handle, I think, about 15 open issues with fancy zones and how to improve the user flow for it. Those would be the two big ones. And then post stability, we have about 10 random ideas that we're looking for as well to kind of double down onto and see if we can do it. Like, one idea that we're going to probably investigate is, could we do a mimic a Mac-ish style font rendering in the operating system? So we kind of know how to do it, but it's a, can we get touch everything? And right now, the proof of concept that we did a while ago can do everything minus Chromium. So that, but without doing Chromium, that means a lot of developer tools won't work. We got to figure out how to get that to work. So that's just one of the cool things we're kind of poking at.
Awesome. Thanks, Clint. All right, and it looks like we've covered all of our questions, so I'll end on one last one for our guest, Niels. As soon as I'm able to get my question sheet to respond and scroll down, there we go. Niels, so we're wondering, are there any other tools or libraries that you use throughout your work? I think this is specifically about what you shared today to help bring your WinUI vision to life.
Right. I think one of the best, let's say, packages that really helped me out with a lot of stuff is the Windows Community Toolkit. It provides a lot of, controls that are not yet in WinUI, but already offer a lot of handy and nifty things that you can leverage, especially the animation library that's there. And I saw a PR that actually will be enhanced in the next version of the Community Toolkit. So it'll be even easier to really make compelling custom animations. So that's yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Thanks, Niels. To everyone watching, thank you for your great questions. We've covered our question list, so if you didn't see your call asked or your question asked here on today's call, please ask us on GitHub. It may have just been too big or technical to cover in this space, but we want to make sure that you get your questions answered so that you're having a great WinUI experience. With that, thank you again to our guests, and I'll turn it back to Anna to close out our call today.
Awesome. Thanks, Savoy. So yeah, that's all we have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope we, gave you all the info that you need. As Savoy said, if you have more questions or if you even want clarity on some of the questions you asked, always feel free to just take them to GitHub and we'll do our best to answer you there. But other than that, hope everybody has a great Wednesday and thanks for joining. All right. Bye, everyone.